News. Okay, we'll start with this. Some recent comments from the former undisputed super lightweight champion Chantel Cameron, who expresses frustration with promoter Eddie Hearn. He was jumping up and down, happy after Katie Taylor's win.
Huh?
Being honest with you, I don't know what Chantel expects him to do. Chantel Cameron pulled off the upset over pound-for-pound #1 and female boxing's biggest star, Katie Taylor, in Taylor's Ireland homecoming this past May. After the fight, Cameron revealed in an interview with No Smoke Sport that she felt her experience in Ireland for the fight was not a pleasant one. I've been hearing a few bits and bobs from my friends, sponsors, and families that things were happening over there, and I don't think they were very nice to some of the people that were supporting me. And you can hardly blame Eddie Hearn. You can hardly blame Katie Taylor for that, for some unpleasantness that you had to fight in Katie's neck of the woods instead of yours. Perhaps if you were as big a draw as she is, they could have done it in your neck of the woods. But for the fight to be as big and for you to make as much money as you ended up making, that's what they had to do.
I like Chantel Cameron.
I really do. Been a fan of her for years, all the way back to when she was promoted by Cyclone Promotions.
Huh?
The now defunct Cyclone Promotions, trained by Shane McGuigan and promoted by Barry, his father.
She's a great fighter, though not very level-headed.
Not very realistic. She continued, my mom definitely didn't want to be coming back to Dublin. She actually told me yesterday she's not going to come back to Dublin to support me if I go back there. Cameron did return to Ireland, though, and was beaten by a near-perfect Taylor who righted the wrongs of the first fight in the second and got the game plan spot on, though not if you ask Chantel Cameron. The holding, the head clashes.
Head clashes happen. The disconnect, I think, is that Chantel views them as deliberate. Chantel views those head clashes as if they're head butts.
Perhaps. It's not uncommon in a Katie Taylor fight for there to be clashes of heads, but I think it's a byproduct of how Katie Taylor fights and how mid-range to inside she falls in, stepping into her combinations and leads with her face, which ends up in the other girls.
And the holding?
It's a smothering tactic to neutralize Chantel Cameron's offense. I don't expect her to be happy about it. I expect her to be angry. I expect her to be frustrated. She told BBC Look East, they always knew I was a threat against Katie Taylor, and that's what happened in the first fight. When you see Eddie Hearn, the matchroom promoter, nearly crying when I actually beat her, in the second fight, in the celebrations, he forgot I was his fighter as well. He was jumping up and down, happy. Obviously, they've had a great story together and a great journey, but they represent me as well. I want the trilogy, but it's hard to work with someone that does that to you. I respect him as a promoter. I became undisputed champion under him, but that, Hearn celebrating Taylor's win, was a little bit cruel and embarrassing for me as well.
I don't think she should be embarrassed, but I do think she should be a little bit more mature and a little bit more understanding. For Eddie Hearn, it's not simply promoting Katie Taylor or Katie Taylor's fight. Katie was literally his introduction, his maiden voyage, his endeavor into the world of women's boxing, and it worked out.
Now you're thinking of yourself. You're saying that she needs to be more understanding of Eddie Hearn and his situation, but shouldn't he be understanding of hers as well? Well, what's the expectation?
What?
Do you expect him to have the same relationship with Chantel that he has with Katie?
Huh?
To hold them both in the same esteem when that's clearly not the case. The whole reason he ended up signing Chantel and other fighters like her is because of Katie.
The champion Okoye of women's boxing and everything it became, the entire stable of Valkyries that they have now, all started with him and Katie. Katie was his flagship fighter to champion that cause. It would be childish.
It is childish to expect things to be some other kind of way. It's childish to expect otherwise. What does Chantel Cameron expect? That they should go over there, do the fight in Manchester, because you're as big a draw as Katie, right?
There is a reason that things are the way that they are, and everyone benefits from it. Not just Katie and Eddie, but Chantel as well. Chantel was the first to beat Katie Taylor, and she did it in Taylor's neck of the woods, which should make the victory that much sweeter.
She says that they knew the whole time that she was a threat to Katie, but my question is, would that have even been possible? Would that fight have even come about if she were with someone else?
If she were with Boxer, a Queensbury, a Vazeman, would they have done the same job promoting her that Matchroom has done?
Just feels like this is one of those situations where Everybody can't get what they want when they want all the time.
Chantel won the first fight, Katie won the second.
See if Chantel wins the third. Though as far as the relationships, no, I don't expect Chantel to have the same relationship with Eddie that Katie has, and no, I don't expect Chantel to be happy about it either.
You can promote her, get her to the titles, see her crowned a 2-division champion, an undisputed champion.
Get her a big fight. One of the biggest fight, if not the biggest fight in women's boxing. But even with that, you can't please everybody. In men's super middleweight news, former IBF super middleweight champion Caleb Plant posted a caption to his social media that reads, "Jermall Charlo, there's no sense in talking about what you quote-unquote plan on doing if you don't plan on fighting me. Don't even stutter my name anymore unless you want to make it official. I'm not hard to find."
Caleb Plant slapped the shit out of Jermall Charlo in the parking lot the week of.
I think that was the week of the Canelo versus Charlo fight. Jermall Charlo, not Jermall.
Now Caleb is calling him out. He's calling him out for a fight, an actual fight. Will Jermall Charlo respond?
This is a fight that we could end up seeing as part of the PBC's new Amazon Prime deal. You know, they're supposed to do 12 to 14 fights on Amazon Prime. This could be one of them. At the same time, per the Boxing Voice, there seems to be a rumor that they may also have a second broadcast partner that has yet to be announced. In any event, this is a fight that can happen. Jermall Charlo's last fight wasn't a middleweight contest. It was fought above middleweight, just north of middleweight, at super middleweight, against Jose Benavidez, of all people.
I wasn't impressed.
It was his first fight in 2.5 years, and he had to work harder for that victory. Work a lot harder than he should have, because Jose Benavidez, he hasn't done anything as a middleweight. This is a guy who used to campaign as a welter. He got knocked out at welter by Terence Crawford, so the fact that Jermall couldn't knock him out at super middle, it says a lot. Jermall, at his very best, he's a boxer puncher.
B-, C+.
So not a very good one, at least not to me. Caleb Plant, he's a pure boxer. And based on that stylistic matchup, just based on the styles, Caleb has the style to give Jermall issues. He's got the style to cause him problems. In a pure boxer versus boxer puncher situation,
And what's David Benavidez?
he's a pressure fighter.
So does that mean that Jermall has the right style to beat David?
Oh, that's a very good question. Because aside from the stylistic matchup, there are other factors you have to consider. What I like to call intangibles. That aside from the fighter's style, at what level does he compete with that style? Is he an A level, a B level, a C level, D, E?
Intangibles.
It's the physical state of the fighter, the psychological state of the fighter. When's the last time the guy had a fight? And when he had that fight, how did he look? Does he have any injuries?
Intangibles.
There are nuances and levels to the game, and you have to factor those in as well, just as well as the styles of the fighters. So while boxer punchers may have a tactical advantage over pressure fighters, that doesn't necessarily mean that Jermall Charlo would beat David Benavidez, because today's Jermall Charlo has some intangibles, some things you need to consider.
He couldn't knock out a guy who used to campaign as a welterweight. So odds are he's not going to be able to knock out a world-class super middleweight. Like David Benavidez.
The weight at which a contest takes place is yet another intangible. You might have been all right at one weight, move up in weight, and suddenly you're not the same guy. So to answer that question, while boxer punchers usually beat pressure fighters, this is one situation where that wouldn't happen.
Jermall don't win that fight.
So what about a fight with Caleb Plant?
Jermall don't win that fight.
Doesn't win that one either?
No, I wouldn't pick him to win that fight. Not today's Jermall Charlo.
He's already at a stylistic disadvantage. The pure boxer versus the boxer puncher favors the pure boxer. So he's already at a stylistic disadvantage, but factor in all the intangibles.
So you're saying that boxer punchers almost never beat pure boxers?
Never say never. Jermall Charlo's brother Jermell actually pulled it off. He pulled it off once, though not before he got beat himself by Tony Harrison, a pure boxer, though in their second fight, he was getting out-hustled again. He was getting out-boxed, and anybody that saw it will tell you that, but he pulled a knockout out of his ass, and he won due to an intangible. And that intangible is, while Tony Harrison is a really skilled pure boxer, He's got a glass jaw.
Doesn't take a good punch. Things like a fighter's punch resistance, his gas tank, his engine, his ability to keep up the pace from one round to the next, these are all intangibles.
The Oxford Dictionary, an intangible is something that is unable to be touched or grasped, not having physical presence. That's how it's defined in Oxford's dictionary. The context of it in the sport of boxing is it's something you don't know until the night of the fight.
But after a couple of fights, you start to know. In the case of Tony Harrison's punch resistance, if you've been watching him, you'll know that, yeah, he's a skilled pure boxer, he's pretty damn good, but he doesn't take a good shot.
So what made it an intangible in the Charlo fights is that Tony had beat him before, and in a rematch you had to wonder, will Jermell Charlo be able to land? Is he going to be able to get that shot off? That's what made that an intangible, and that's one of the rare instances where a boxer-puncher actually beat a pure boxer.
It's rare, but it happens.
And you're saying that it wouldn't happen in a fight between Jermall Charlo and Caleb Plant.
I wouldn't bet on it. You'd trust today's Jermall Charlo with your money?
In a fight where he's at a stylistic disadvantage, at a new weight where all he's done is fight a guy who used to campaign as a welterweight, not even a bona fide super middle, you would trust Jermall Charlo in that situation? Because I wouldn't.
I don't. And it's for that reason I'm not even sure if that fight happens.
Of course, you have to look at the styles of the fighters, and that'll give you some insights into how the fight might look once the opening bell sounds. But with a fighter like Jermall, who's got all this stuff going on outside of the ring, mental health stuff, whatever you want to call it, personally, I just think the guy was using drugs.
I just think he's a junkie.
Tend to think about these matchups in an arena where both fighters are keeping themselves up and they're at their best, the very best they can be, but not in this situation. This is not two consummate professionals coming together that have been keeping themselves up at the top of their game. This is not two consummate professionals coming together and having a fight.
Today's Jermall Charlo is so compromised, they had to conjure up a guy who used to campaign as a welterweight to keep him unbeaten. So no, I don't trust him.
The edge goes to Caleb Plant, if they actually make the fight. In men's super lightweight news, Bill Haney, the father of Devin Haney, says Devin is number one pound for pound. How much credit can we give Crawford for the Spence fight? And this got reactions from some people. I held off on lambasting Bill for what he was saying because he's Devin's father. What do you expect him to say? No other fighter has done what Devin has done. Bill Haney said during the post-fight press conference, crossing the pond to become undisputed against Kambosos in Australia. That's really not what people mean when they say crossing the pond. Coming up to another division and fighting the hard-hitting, arguably no one, the boogeyman no one wanted to fight. He's the number one fighter right now, pound for pound. And it's no slight towards Terence Crawford's performance, but if Errol Spence was depleted and he has to go up to 154, how much fucking credit can we give Terence for that fight?
When people say crossing the pond, they're talking about going from the US to the UK or the UK to the US.
And the pond, as it were, is the Atlantic Ocean. That phrase, crossing the pond, that's what they're talking about. What they're not talking about is flying to the southern hemisphere from America to Australia. That's not actually what they mean.
So is Devin number one pound for pound?
Maybe on Bill Haney's pound for pound list. Maybe on Bill's, though not many, if any, others that I've seen. I mean, he's not number one on mine. He's not top 5 on mine, but he can get there. I don't know, Devin Haney said when asked about his pound for pound status. I put it in Allah's hands, I'm not rushing anything. I'm still young, 25 years old. It's only a matter of time. I'll be number one on that pound for pound list, but I'm climbing the ladder. And that bit of it, I agree with it. Listen, what Bill Haney does on his son's behalf and what he says, he's basically his hype man, his promoter, which is no less than what I would expect from a doting father who's doting on his son. Bill's not doing anything for Devin that I wouldn't do for my own kid and you wouldn't do for yours.
Say about yours. To Bill, Devin is God's gift to boxing because to Bill, Devin is God's gift to him.
I don't hold that against Bill, even if I don't agree with what he's saying, and don't agree sometimes with what he's doing, trying to drag Subriel Matias' name in the mud by pretending that he priced himself out for you calling Peter Kahn, who's not even his manager. That's what he said immediately after the Prograis fight. A lie that backfired.
A lie that Team Matias immediately addressed as soon as they caught wind of what Bill was saying.
Peter Kahn has absolutely nothing to do with the career of Subriel Matias, so why would Peter Kahn tell Bill that Matias wants $4 million?
Subriel Matias didn't say that, and Peter doesn't manage it.
We've been all through that. I take whatever Bill Haney says and does with a pinch of salt because I know he's only doing what a father would do, though in reality, if people don't have Devin Haney ranked the #1 pound-for-pound fighter in the sport, it's because, in spite of being an undisputed champion at such a young age, he only actually beat one champion to do it, and that was George Kambosos. It's not like he had to go through a gauntlet of guys, a gauntlet of different champions, collecting their belts one by one. He won most of the belts he won from one guy, the same guy, George.
Look deeper.
It's good that he beat Regis Prograis the way that he did, and I said that he would, but that hardly makes him the #1 pound-for-pound fighter in the sport. He's not the most accomplished fighter in the sport. He's not more accomplished than Terence Crawford, and no, beating Regis Prograis is not a bigger win than beating Errol Spence Jr. Devin's fight with Regis doesn't have the backdrop and the backstory that Terence and Errol had. Regis himself is not as decorated a fighter as Errol Spence Jr. was, and that bit about the weight, yeah, that's a fan-driven narrative. Errol Spence Jr. never said nothing about weight, and neither did Derek James. In fact, Derek said the opposite. For all those people blaming it on the weight, Derek said it wasn't the weight. Terence simply had the better game plan. So when Bill brings this up, what he's using are fan-driven narratives to grasp at straws.
You're using stuff the fans say to make excuses for Errol. Excuses Errol isn't making, and neither is Derek.
That's how Bill manipulates the fans. The reality is, while Devin's career has been off to a great start, and he's doing very well with himself, this past weekend's fight does not make him a more accomplished fighter than Terence Crawford. Terence has been a champion at three weights overall, lineal in all of them, and undisputed 2 times.
Devin's only been undisputed once. Terence has been a champion in 3 weight classes. Devin just became a champion in 2, and Devin hasn't beaten as many champions as Terence Crawford. Taken belts from them, because we're not talking about former champions.
Guys who used to have a belt but didn't have one when you fought them. I mean, context is key, and context is what a lot of people like to leave out when talking boxing. That's what Bill is doing when he talks about Devin in contrast with Terence. What I will say is Bill, and a lot of people, need to stop taking the piss out of Terence and diminishing his victory over Errol. You're literally making excuses that Errol himself isn't making. Just accept it.
You were wrong.
And Terence won. He's the king.
Huh?